Hello everyone! Thanks for joining me today on this episode of Taking It From the Top, where we'll be extending our conversation about articulation technique into the Altissimo register. When it comes to playing in the Altissimo register, it's important that our embouchure remains relatively stable. But to cultivate this sense of stability in our technique, I think it's important that we uncover the flexibility that we have in this register. For me, this was inspired by listening to my friend Eric Zhang warming up with a series of pitch bends. When it comes to articulating passages like the one that we find in Ibert's concertino, so many of us get so bogged down with just trying to hit the notes that our perception of these articulated notes is incredibly narrow. But wouldn't it be helpful if the target was just bigger in general? The premise of Eric's pitch bending exercises is that we want to build a flexibility within each of these fingerings so that the target for articulation becomes much bigger, and then we build confidence to approach these passages in a performance setting. If we take the last 5 notes of the lick, no, not that one, and apply pitch bends to each of the notes, I learned to uncover the flexibility that I have within each fingering so that when I'm approaching articulating these notes, I have a much bigger bullseye in mind. So what I'm going to do here is pitch bend on each of the notes, but when I get to the bottom of the pitch bend, I'm going to switch to the next note in the melodic idea. The key to this exercise is to keep the air in motion so that when we layer in the articulation technique, it doesn't get in the way of our fine-tuning of our voicing positions. Another thing to consider is that we never want to inhibit the reed from vibrating. In my work with Professor Joe Luloff, he had me experiment with articulations ranging from hard stops with the tongue to a light dampening of the reed, but making sure that I was always supporting the sound with a steady airstream. This focus on an airstream allows the reed to rebound and respond quicker so that we can work less to get more out of the crisp articulations, similar to what we're trying to achieve in the third movement of Dahl's Saxophone Concerto. Another way that we can go about freeing the reed is to combat our tendencies to want to clench the embouchure or pinch off the reed as we ascend into the Altissimo register. In my work with Dr. Timothy McAllister, we often talked about this idea of elongating the embouchure on a vertical plane and speeding up the air as we ascended through the upper register. While the relaxation concept doesn't necessarily manifest in substantial jaw movement, the idea of approaching the upper register with a neutral embouchure setting will allow us to control the parameters of tone color and pitch much more readily as we allow the reed to vibrate more freely. Finally, in an effort to cultivate proficiency and fluency with our technique rather than learning a series of licks through our repertoire, is that we have to switch things up every so often. Similar to the idea when we practice our scales, we're practicing in variations of interval content, rhythmic groupings, and articulation patterns. This idea of applying our technique in a variety of musical settings allows us to learn music much quicker and then much more quickly move to more important conversations about the music rather than just trying to execute the notes on the page. One of the immediate payoffs for this musical flexibility in our repertoire is by looking at William Bolcom's concert suite, where the opening and closing material of this piece are just duple and triple variations of the same melodic material. Thanks so much for watching this episode of Taking It From the Top. If you like what you saw, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this content with anybody that you think would find it helpful. Over the next few weeks, we'll be taking a short break from our regularly recorded content, but before we leave and do that, make sure to stay tuned for a composer resource that I'll be collaborating on with my dear friend Keaton Garrett.